Likutei Torah Parshas Acharei, page Chavav, second column. We started Ois Gimel. We're like 10 lines into Ois Gimel. Okay, the Alter Rebbe was explaining that you need the fire needs fuel, but this in the last thing we're learning is the pasuk says Eish Echlu, it has to be a consuming fire. Fire only burns when the fuel becomes consumed, which means that the fuel becomes part of the fire. So he says in Ruchnius what it means is that the fuel, which is Torah Acharei Mot, and which is Machshava Dibur Ma'aseh, which is B'riyut and Asiyah, these can only hold godliness if it's done with bittul. If it's done with bittul, then they become consumed in the godliness, and then the fire functions. So he says, through these three things of Torah Acharei Mot, Shalom Mamshich and Be'emer Hashem, that we bring down a lukus with it, Avshin Islabish B'dvarim Gashmi. Even though l'cha'era, we're talking about bringing godliness into a physical object, which is not holy by itself, and seichel anushi. Okay, 1 second, no, I'm second. We don't know. We learned this. I'm sorry. No, we're all the way down. Okay, he says, how does a lukus come into Gashmis? So he said, Hashem says, Anik v'rishrana, I'm like a slingshot. Just like a slingshot, you bend it all the way back and then it flies high. Same thing in Kedusha, it comes into Gashmis, but it flies very high. But then the Alter Rebbe explained that you have the same thing in evil. You can do a slingshot in evil. If you have thought, speech, and action that is evil, so then you cause a lukus to fly very, very low. What's the eitzah? He said that's the level of tshuva. Okay, so this is where we're up to. We're going to start 7 lines from the end of the page. Sorry. So he said, so what's the eitzah to bring the slingshot back to the opposite way is tshuva. So he says, this explains why we say in davening, Slach lanu mechal lanu. We ask Hashem forgiveness. Like these 2 lines we learned. When you ask forgiveness means, I did something wrong to you, and you need to forgive me. If I didn't do anything wrong to you, you don't ask forgiveness. L'chayra by Hashem, the Maimer Chazal zim tzedaktem atitin lei, machatasem atifo bei, v'rabu b'shachem ataslei. If you sin, we don't do anything to Hashem, because Hashem is so up there, it's totally irrelevant what we do. So l'chayra, why are we asking mechila, which means seemingly that we did do something bad to Hashem, and we're asking Him to forgiveness. He says, she'eine k'pshutei, because chatosim atifel bei ma'inyan mechila ela inyan. What are we asking? This is where we're up to, by the way. Levak and sham mechila. What we're asking is to ask forgiveness. What does it mean? The forgiveness is galus harotzi, the revelation of Hashem's will. Sheyoshev v'tzaynei, that Hashem should return His will to be resting on us. In other words, when we do mitzvah, Hashem is resting on us. When we do an Aveda, we throw Hashem with a slingshot to the opposite side of evil. So what were we asking Hashem? Mechal lanu means not only mechid that we did something wrong to you. We're asking Hashem to please return your will that we caused you to leave us. We want you to come back. And like we say, Micha Mecha of Harachamim. Who is like you of Harachamim? It doesn't say the Rachman. Of Harachamim means the Father of mercy, meaning He is the source of mercy. So we're not asking somebody to have mercy on us. We're asking the level of Hashem, Avinu of Harachamim, meaning all the levels of the world, from the Hamiresh Atzof. When we speak about the worlds, from the highest level, in the spiritual realms, all the way down to the lowest of the physical realms, it's all zechira achas. It's all one remembrance, one thought. They can quote the Zohar, the machshava achas bara sa'olamis. With one thought, Kaviyachal Hashem created all the worlds. So what we're asking Hashem is, all of these things, all the worlds are like one like the expression, like a spit into the ocean. You don't really do anything to the ocean. Hashem looks and looks out and looks at all the end of all generations. He calls all generations from the beginning, meaning that all the generations existed in this one machshava of Hashem. That's what we ask in Rosh Hashanah. That you remember everything from the beginning to the end in one shot. So what are we asking? That now that we sinned, we're asking Hashem, because you're merciful, you have Rachmanis on us, which means, the definition of Rachmanis means you don't deserve it, and I'm giving it to you anyway. When a boss pays a worker, he doesn't have Rachmanis on him. It's not called Rachmanis. The worker worked, and the boss has to pay him. If the worker didn't work, and he doesn't deserve the money, and the boss pays him, that's called Rachmanis. When somebody has the attribute of Rachmanis, and he gives tzedakah to a poor person, you don't owe the poor person anything. So we're saying, Hashem should have Rachmanis on us, meaning, even though we sinned, even though l'cha'ira, we threw you out of here, because we disfueled you, unfueled you, whatever. We took away the fuel. Not only did we take away the fuel, we slingshotted you into evil. So nevertheless, you should have Rachmanis. In Cain, miyad sha'alu kol ha'elam is machshava. So therefore, the second it entered Hashem's machshava to create the world, there's an expression that lamata koyach chaser poyel, lamaila ein koyach chaser poyel. Means like this: down here, the potential doesn't mean it happened. Right? If I have the potential to do something, doesn't mean it happened. Koyach chasar poyel. The koyach, the potential, lacks the actual being. L'mayla ain't koyach chasar poyel. L'mayla, because Hashem doesn't think koyach and poyel, it's all the same thing. The second Hashem entered his mind to create the world, everything was done. Right? 1 second. V'nei the b'chush goydel atzimtzum. We see clearly. The great tzimtzum shetzimtzum erintzov machshava achas, that even this one thought compared to the essence of Hashem is really nothing. For Hashem, which is infinite, the ultimate infinite, which is higher than infinite and finite together, for him to come down and to limit himself into one machshava, that's a tremendous tzimtzum. Like the Rebbe explains in Parak Chaf of Tanya, one word compared to the Koyach HaDibor, which is infinite, is nothing. How much more nothing is it to Machshava? How much more is it nothing to Midas? How much more nothing is it to Seichel? How much more nothing is it to willpower? How much more nothing is it compared to the essence? So even Machshava Achas, compared to the level of Hashem, is a tremendous descent of Elokus, that Elokus lowered himself to come into one machshava to create the world. What did you want? Excuse me.
The Rebbe says that Hashem sees all the generations in his machshava.
Correct.
So when Moshe Rabbeinu saw all the future generations, does that mean that Hashem elevated him to his machshava?
Hashem elevated Moshe Rabbeinu to a level above time and place, yeah? It's wow. A Jew does one mitzvah, see that they're above time and place. It's a big deal. When a Jew does one mitzvah, he's above time and place.
I don't see the future generation.
Well, you don't see because you're blind. A Jew does a mitzvah, without the Rebbe explaining Perek Chafei of Tanya. A Jew does one mitzvah. Mitzvah means binding, tzavsa, v'chibur. So a Jew does a mitzvah, Yeah, you connect yourself to Hashem. You put on tefillin Friday morning, you connect yourself to Hashem. Now Hashem is not limited in time and place. So when you connect yourself to Hashem, that connection is above time and place. So it's not like 6 o'clock I put on tefillin to 6:30. So that half an hour I'm connected to Hashem. By connecting yourself to Hashem in that half an hour, because you're connected to Hashem, and Hashem is above time and place, so you're connected permanently. Right? What does that mean? A Jew, when they do a mitzvah, is above time and place. But Moshe Rabbeinu was nicer, you know what I mean? He saw the future. So he says, why does Hashem do it? Why does Hashem come into Machshava if it's such a descent? He said, because Hashem has Rahmanis on us. Hashem has Rahmanis on us. He lowers himself, and let's put it this way, into an embarrassing situation of lowering himself into one machshava, which compared to the essence of Hashem is infinitely times nothing. Why? For our benefit.
He's not lowering himself, I'm lowering him.
What?
I am lowering him with my wrongdoings.
No, he's speaking about even when you do good things. The fact that Hashem comes into this world, right, and gives us the opportunity to connect to Him is tremendous, excuse me, tremendous rachmanis.
It's not embarrassing.
For Hashem to come into something below His dignity is an embarrassment. When does a person become embarrassed? When they do something below the dignity. If it's your dignity, then it's not you're not embarrassed by it. It's not the way of a king to deal with simple words. It's below the dignity of Hashem himself to deal with light and darkness and animals and people. And what we do is through tshuva we awaken the attribute of Rachmanis. The Rachim al Olam is to have pity on the world. So he says like this: when a person meditates into all this, he'll realize the whole inyan of tshuva is returning to where you came from. Where does a person get that attitude of returning to? When you have Rahmanas on yourself, you think to yourself, look what happened to me. Okay, it's like, not lahavdil, but an addicted person to whatever they're addicted to doesn't come back until they hit rock bottom. You know that until you hit rock bottom, you don't go back. Why is that? Because when you finally hit rock bottom, that's when you wake up to realize, look how far I fell. And therefore, when you hit the rock bottom, that's when you want to do tshuva. Until you hit rock bottom, a lot of times a person doesn't want to do tshuva. Because, it's still good. When a person meditates on in the source, Dama ayin basa, we come from the level of ayin. Right? Dama ayin basa, the Mishnah says. What does it mean ayin? From the level of ayin, shehi bechinas of rachmim, which is the source of everything, which is the level of rachmanis. Imkein ayuri the sheyade mir panavis barich. This yirida that the neshama comes down. He gedol made is tremendously great. It comes from the highest towers to the lowest pits. This will make the nefesh tremble. The noggin will touch and the kudus alev mamish. Sheyich lenafshi, his soul will have the longing. V'yoshev al Hashem to do tshuva. So he says if a person is mizbeinin, Another place, here the Alter Rebbe is talking about a sin. But as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, tshuva ilah is not only for sin. Tshuva ilah is a level, as he says in the Gersa Tshuva. Aruach toshva lakim Hashem nesana. The neshama comes back to Hashem. So even if a person is a tzaddik, that they don't sin, Beinani a tzaddik, they don't sin. The fact that the neshama is coming into a body, and a nefesh habamis, and a gashmistic world, that is a tremendous descent. The Rebbe brings down the Sikh, there's a Zohar that says, when Avram laughed, when Hashem told him you're going to have Yitzchak. So Rashi over there says, Yitzchak means not like Sarah laughed and denied it, and Avram was happy with it. But the Zohar says, how did Avram Avinu laugh? So he says, as great as Avram Avinu was, Mikama came good for you, still a body. The Neshama is still in a body. So that's why the level of tshuva doesn't necessarily have to do with sin. A person who doesn't sin, and this is, he said, the Rachmanis, a person needs to meditate on. How does a person decide to become closer to Hashem? So first you have to realize how far you are. If you don't realize how bad you are, you're not going to wake up to say, I got to become better, because you think you're the best. You think you're great. You have to think you're bad, and then when you realize you're bad, not say I'm bad, realize you're bad, that's what causes the person to go back. And the same thing in the higher level of tshuva. Even if it's not Averis. The fact that you realize the neshama comes from such a lofty place, and it comes down into the low body, it's still a body. It's still limited and restricted by the body. You have to eat, and you have to sleep, and you have to do things. It's a limitation. That is it. So you have to awaken Rachmanis on yourself. Here the Alter Rebbe is talking, when you sin, you say, Slach lanu v'nikachatanu. But according to this, what the Alter Rebbe is explaining here, then why do tzaddikim say, Slach lanu v'nikachatanu? V'chal lanu makenu? So simply, it says in Kabbalah and Chassidus, it says about the Arizal, when he said, Hashamnu bagadnu, he didn't Hashamnu bagadnu. So it said, because he was in the Neshama Klali, he included within him all the Neshamas of all the Yidden of his generation. So therefore, when he said Hashamna represents the Yidden who sinned, not him personally. But according to this, it represents even that level of the Tzaddik also, that he has a level of the Rachmanis, that the Neshama came down from such a high place to a low place. And that's what you need to awaken. And when you have tshuva from this level, Zedainis, Nasa, Kazachis, Avedas become mitzvahs. So the question is, how can an Aveda become a mitzvah? I understand I could do tshuva, I can erase the sin. You know, the tears, it says in Svam, the tears of tshuva erase the sin. But the Chayra, how can it make a sin into a mitzvah? So he said, Shem Shahid. So he said, how is it possible? Because what is a mitzvah? A mitzvah means you're connecting yourself to Hashem. So normally a mitzvah is what connects you to Hashem. But what happens when you feel you're very thirsty because you're in the desert? Nafshi. My soul is thirsty to you. My soul is, also an expression of thirst, but longing to you. Where David HaMelech says, in a dry, desolate place. Like everybody knows, the second you go out into a desert, you're already thirsty. The second the fast day starts, you don't eat anyway till, let's say, to 8 o'clock, but already 6 o'clock in the morning on the fast day, you're hungry. If you ever take kids on a trip in a car, 10 minutes into the trip, they need the bathroom, and they're thirsty and they're hungry. If they'd be home, they wouldn't need the bathroom. Why is it? This is human nature, but there's a reason for it. The Gemara says, "Mishi yesh pas b'salei." A person has bread in his basket is never hungry. Why? Because you know any minute I can eat it. If you don't have pas b'salei, you don't have bread. That means you don't know that any minute I could do it. So you're already hungry. So why is it on the fast day, on a regular day, you're not hungry or thirsty? Because I know any minute I want, I can take it. So mentally, I'm not hungry. You know you can't have it. There's no bathroom in the car. So the second you go into the car, I'm thirsty, hungry, a bathroom. So the same thing is in Elokus. When a person realizes that they're far away from Hashem, and that distance causes the person to be thirsty to Hashem, that itself is a mitzvah. What is a mitzvah? Mitzvah means binding to Hashem. Zedainis Nasli Kazachis, the Alter Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek explains there from Tzachah, whatever, it's all over the place. That when a person has this longing because they feel far, that longing is a connection. And David Amar says, Kain ba'kodesh chazisicha, as the interpretation means, halavai ba'kodesh in Yerushalayim, I should have the same longing. So therefore, what is the concept of Chassidus? That the Aveda becomes a mitzvah, because mitzvah means connection and binding. The Aveda caused you to have this longing of distance from Hashem, so therefore you're connected. That's a mitzvah. So he said, Shem Shaydei Zachias, Tisal and Nafshe Be'er Hashem, just like through a mitzvah, you become elevated and close to Hashem. Kachtis ala nafshe, aidei meriris gedei lazeis. This great bitterness, and that's why b'makom shebali tshuva imdim. But the Gemara says that in the place where Baal Tshuva stands, tzaddikim gemurim don't stand, are not able to stand there. That's talking about tshuva me'ava, like Mr. Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya. It's talking about a regular tshuva. Because the Gemara, there's different levels of tshuva. There's tshuva me'ava, there's tshuva me'ira, there's tshuva, there's a tshuva that Avedas become non-existent. There's a lower level of tshuva that the intentional sins become like accidental sins. The Gemara says in Yuma. Then there's a level of tshuva that the sins are wiped out completely. Then you have tshuva me'ava, that the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. So these are different levels of tshuva of what happens to your Avedas. But he says when a person is awakening, because again he says, what's the connection? He says because the Eish Eichel, the fire has to be a consuming fire, has to be bittul to Hashem. And therefore when you do that, you're like slingshot flying high. But what happens if you slingshot the opposite way? So then you need to be connected. Okay, so Dalid, what? Oh. So he says, K'hinei b'Moshe Rabbeinu ksiv, b'Moshe Rabbeinu after the Chet HaEgel. It says, when Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, Areini nos kvedacha, right? So it says, Hashem said to him, I'll put you in the cracks of the rock. So what happened over there? Moshe Rabbeinu said, Areini nos kvedacha. Hashem said, no person can see me and live. So Hashem says to him, okay, I'll put you b'nikras hatzor. And Varisa Sacherai upon Elero. So what did Hashem reveal to Moshe at that time? The Yud Gimel Midas Rachman, the pasuk says. Pirush, what does it mean? Nikra Satzor. What's this expression in the crack of the rock? What's it mean in Ruchnias? Tzur El Yimaka V'Sheiresh Kol Shoshi Yisavos. Like it says in the pasuk, Habitu Al Tzur Chutzaftem. Look at the rock that carved you. So Hashem is called sword. We don't say it in davening, but other than Nusach Ashkaf, they say right before Shemoneh Esrei, they say Tzur Yisrael V'Goy Alei. Hashem is the rock. Or it says Albito Tzur Chutzaftem. The Gamash Tzur Achalomish. Just like the Tzur Achalomish, it's called in English the flintstone. Shemak and by Yehidit La'itzi Ha'esh. What does it mean when you have a rock? The rock is the source of fire. Right? You hit the rock, you could rub stones together, like other magicians did, so you create fire. Now there's no fire in the rock. You could touch the rock, it's not hot. You could put the rock into water for 20 years. You take out the rock from the water, and you rub it, and you're going to create fire. What does it have to do with the flintstone? The Torah Chalomish has the koyach, the potential to make fire. But it's not fire, that's what it's called. But nevertheless, so the same thing, Hashem is called Tzur Chayein, we say in Maidim. Tzur Chayeinu Magen Yishenu. What does it mean? What do you mean Hashem is the rock of our life? So what it means, Al Rebbe is explaining you, just like a rock is the source of fire, Hashem is the source of our existence. Tzur Chayenu, Hashem is the rock, the source of our life. L'chol shar she'avaya. V'shar she'avaya hu b'y behelam b'kerch v'lei b'poil. Okay? In the name of Avaya. Lies mahava kol hanimtzoim miyayin liyesh. So he says the rock represents the source of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Hashem is mahava, the actual older creations, which is a level eish eichla now. Avo b'chinas hatzur shememenu nimshach v'nesav b'chinas eish eichla. Okay, but the tzur is the source of it. So he says, V'nei godul keichen shabali tshuva, that they reached back to this level of tzur. What does that mean? Kana marshal im nichba ma'ara eish. If a fire is extinguished, so where do you go to get more fire? Okay, here you strike a match, but you'd go back to Tzur Chalomish. Kacha im ba'al tshuva. By them, they extinguish through this Averis. They extinguish the fire of Hashem within them. Fishein lam psilas va'etzim. They don't have the fuel elements. There's no Torah mitzvahs. So, right, so there's no fuel. So right what happens? The fire leaves. So therefore, there's no fuel because there's no Torah ma'asim tevim. Through meridas gedela benekudas alev. Through the bitterness, which comes from the essence of the heart, which is above time, like it says, Rabbi ben Dodaya, so then you tap into a level of godliness above time and place. Therefore, it's later anyway. How long does tshuva take? 1 second. 1 second, the Zohar says you do tshuva. You turn around from east to west, you're already going the opposite direction. So that is tapping into above time and place. Because tshuva comes to the level of neshama, which is above time and place. That's why tshuva could undo the past. Even though the past is the past, how could tshuva undo today, undo yesterday? Yesterday's in the history books, because it's taka higher than time and place.